So you've got your first webinar planned. You've intended to actually create a webinar to be able to sell your product, maybe your course. Maybe you've got some sort of a program. Maybe you're building a funnel that actually wants to invite people to book a call with you for either your consulting business or your medical business or whatever the thing is that you have on the back end of your business. And in this video, I'm going to be covering the content that you actually need to place inside of your webinar and the structure that it needs to be in so that you get the maximum benefit in terms of sales, in terms of engagement, and all of those good things that go along with webinars. Hey, my name is Burhan, and I've helped clients all around the world with their webinars, with their marketing funnels, with their social media, with their advertising online. These videos are designed to help you with exactly that. If you're new to the channel, consider hitting the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss another video. Let's get into the webinar structure. Let's get into the content that you actually need to have in your webinar. And this is going to be a step-by-step guide. So let's get into it right now. So you may want to grab a pen and paper or maybe a notepad or something on your phone to actually make notes of this structure. I will have it all down in the description as well. And I'll also have links to a couple of different tools that I may mention throughout the video. One of the first things about your webinar, and it may be obvious, but we need to figure out what the goal of your webinar is. So if you have let's say this webinar planned around a specific topic, and I'm recommending that you do one specific topic that you're going to be teaching or that you're going to be demonstrating on the webinar. You want a specific goal for that webinar, and I'll show you how to break that down in a second. So let's say you want to have 10 people sign up to your course, or 15 people or 30 people, or whatever the number is that you want for those registrations. If you have a call funnel, if you have a call funnel that you're using your webinar to try to get people to actually book a call with you, to consult with them later on, then maybe you want to do 5 calls or 20 calls or whatever the case may be. And because this is your first webinar, you're not quite sure how many people are going to convert, because on your first webinar, you're probably going to have, you're probably going to make a few mistakes. There may be some technical challenges. You're obviously new to the webinar. Expect a conversion rate that's decent, or expect a few people to, convert, but I wouldn't say like overextend yourself. Like having 50% conversion rate, let's say 100 people show up and 50 people book a call from your first webinar. It's possible, and I've seen it happen, helped that happen, but it's not common. Set your expectations in a realistic way and be sure that at least you have an outcome that you're aiming for, that you want a certain number of people to sign up to your programs or to your course or whatever the thing is that you're offering. And that leads me to the second thing, which is in terms of knowing what that offer is, make sure that your webinar is lined up to that offer. You don't want to be talking about pet food and then be selling a course on how to grow vegetables, right? Of course, you wouldn't do that because that's not aligned at all. There's no congruency between the messages. And so people who are coming in for the webinar for pet food are not going to buy your vegetable course because there's just no match. Be obvious about the fact that or be clear about the fact that there's a link between your webinar and what you're actually talking about in your offer or in your program later on that you're going to be offering in your webinar. One of the other goals of your webinar must be to create engagement. So remember, people are coming to you live. They're going to be spending 30 minutes, 45 minutes, maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours, depending on how long you've set your webinar to be. And they're going to be investing that time with you. And so you want to create an environment that's warm, that's comfortable, that's relaxed, that's entertaining, and that's engaging to them. And the way to do that is to actually create participation. So certain tools have the ability to create polls. And of course, you can set up polls to ask various things, to get people to vote on certain questions that you may have throughout your webinar. Maybe there's a controversial topic or there's something that you're talking about relative to the webinar content, and you want to ask a specific question that gets people to polarize or to gets you information of, what are the people that are on your webinar thinking about, or which way are they leaning. And so depending on how you structure the poll questions and the answers, you could tailor your content around those answers. I suggest you start your webinar like a few minutes before the time. So if you're starting at let's say 6 p.m., start your webinar around 5 minutes beforehand so that you get yourself organized, you get your tech set up, you make sure your microphone is all, sounding good, that your camera is working right, that your presentation is up, so that when people start arriving on the hour, that you're ready. And give people time to show up. Another thing you can do, and this is what I would recommend in the welcome section, which is in section 1, in the first 3 to 5 minutes, welcome people in, acknowledge people who are showing up. Hey, Barbara, thank you so much for arriving. Or people, say hi. Ask people to say hi to you, or say hi to them as they say hi to you. Ask people where they're from, right? That's a very common thing to do in webinars, to start creating this engagement, to start creating this participation from the audience. And then, you go into obviously where you're from, and maybe you have a little bit of a chit chat between people, 3 to 5 people. And if it's people definitely, call them out and say, hey, thank you for showing up. Hey, like Barbara, I keep using Barbara. Barbara, thank you so much for attending. Or, hey, Barbara, I hope you're doing well. So nice to see you. So that they feel acknowledged, so they feel that you've noticed them. Because if your webinar is promoted well and your funnel is working well to bring people into your webinar, if you have a few hundred people there, one of the most important things is to make sure, or to try to make sure, that people are acknowledged. The goal of your webinar should also be to get people to stay for as long as possible. You want to get people towards the middle and end to stay as much as possible. All right, so let's get into the structure of the webinar and how your webinar should actually flow. Once you've done your welcome and you've introduced yourself a little bit, and you've welcomed people in, you want to start talking about certain pain points. You want to start talking about the topic, obviously, of the webinar, but you want to start talking around pain points around that certain thing. So for example, if you're teaching people how to grow their social media accounts and your webinar is around that, then you might talk about how frustrating it is that the algorithm changes. Or you might talk about how, people are experiencing low engagement on their Instagram posts, or how, they're not getting a lot of reach or not a lot of impressions on their social media accounts. You won't solve those problems. You won't give solutions to those problems. You'll just stay on those points and keep listing the pain points so that you can touch on as many pain points with as many people as you can who are attending your webinar. And let's say you have 100 people. Obviously, people are experiencing different issues. And if you're covering the major pain points or their major problems that they have with whatever the topic is that you're talking about, then you're going to be talking to the majority of the people that are showing up. Next, you want to go into sort of the dream state. What would it be like if your Instagram account was growing daily? What would it be like if your followers were engaging with you on every single post, and if people were commenting on your stories and engaging on your polls on your Instagram stories? If obviously your webinar is about Instagram stories or Instagram itself and engagement on Instagram and growing your Instagram account. You've outlined the problems in the previous slide or in the previous few slides, and now you're talking about the dream state. You'd probably spend about 10 or 15 minutes on this dream state where you're giving them the best case scenario without being overly optimistic, right? You're giving them a realistic goal or a realistic feel as to what they can expect from actually solving that problem and what life would be like if they solved that problem. I'm not talking about like fancy cars and jumbo jets and private planes and helicopters and all those kids. Well, if your webinar does solve that and if your product does solve that, then sure, bring that up. But we're talking about the dream state of how they, not how they solve the problems, but what it would be like if they solved their problems. Then you're going to be talking about some teaching points, and maybe specifically one teaching point or 3 teaching points. Definitely it's going to be a mini lesson or a mini sort of a course that you're teaching something around what the problem is they had and how to get to that dream state that you've just outlined. And so these teaching points are probably going to be around 20 minutes into your webinar, where people who are there are going to be glued to their seat now because you've spoken about their problems, so you've related to them, you've given them some sort of a dream state of where they wish they were, where they wish they would be, and now you're talking about how to solve some of those issues. You're not giving them all the juicy details. You're not going into very detailed specific things. You might give them 1 or 2, but you'd give them sort of nuggets of information that's fairly common knowledge, maybe on the internet, or maybe stuff that you would recommend for free and not, not inside your program, or maybe it's in your program, but it's not the major talking point in your program. You'd help them to try to solve that problem. Some actionable things that they can actually take away from the webinar so that they don't feel like they've spent 45 minutes to an hour with you and not gone away with anything. People love taking things away. And so definitely while you're talking about all of these things, create engagement and create sort of polls and ask questions back to your audience that you can get feedback that based on what you're saying, that people are interacting and that they're acknowledging you. So once you're done with your teaching moment, you're probably around 25, maybe 30, maybe 40 minutes into your webinar, you're going to start going into sort of what your solution is and how you're actually going to help them solve. And so you'll start outlining things that would be in your call to action, which would be things like, well, why did you create this webinar and why did you create the program that you're about to talk about? And you'll start talking about the program in terms of its benefits, in terms of its features, in terms of what the promise is to the people that are showing up to the webinar. And there are a few things inside your call to action that you make sure that you cover. And I'm going to cover that in just a second. So if you're liking the video, please do hit the like button and give me a comment below. Let me know what you're doing for your first webinar. Let me know if you had a first webinar already, how it went. Let me know if the structure is resonating with you, and if there's anything that you have that you want to ask, definitely put it in the comments. I respond to every single question. So coming back to the call to action, your call to action needs to be very, very specific, outlining one, your benefits of your course or your program, or your, what the call is going to entail, who's going to be interacting with them when they're actually inside of that course or on the call, why the benefits will actually solve those pain points that you spoke about earlier in the video or earlier in the webinar. You're going to talk about some of the bonuses that are included or that may be included specifically because they attended the webinar. I suggest you offer bonuses for people who have actually attended the webinar so that they feel like they've spent the time with you in this webinar. They've registered, put the time aside, attended the webinar, and so that they're going to get something special for just showing up, which is going to be different to people who maybe buy your offer outside of the program. And another thing that you're going to do for them is give them a slightly lower price. Maybe you're going to give them a payment plan that makes it easier for them to actually buy into your program or buy into your whatever the thing is that you're selling. Those bonuses plus the discounted price gives people an incentive to act immediately. Because one thing you want to do is create urgency on your webinar where it's a limited offer. It's something that they're only going to get now because they've registered. Hopefully this is a live webinar that you're preparing. And so because it's live, because of that, the fact that they can sense that you're getting towards the end, that your teaching points are already done, and that, now it's time to actually invite them into your program or into your coaching or whatever the thing is, they can sense it, right? People can sense when the end of movies are coming. People can sense just based on time, but also based on how you're framing your conversation and how you're presenting the slides. People can sense that there's something coming towards the end. You want to limit your offer and you want to give people who attend an incentive to take action right away. And then make it easy for people to actually go to your offer. Right? This is something that I've seen often where people will have a webinar up and they'll put the URL for their offer on the screen, and it's some long webinar URL that people are just going to forget, and they're not going to be able to take a note. Maybe they can't take a screenshot. Maybe they go to a different browser and they try to type it in, but they spell it wrong because now you're urgently trying to get this thing from you. They spell something wrong and it doesn't work. And so that you don't want those issues to come up. You want to have a URL on your slide that's going to be easy to remember, easy to type in, and preferably has one word after after your domain URL. And then also certain webinar software will give you the ability to put a button on the page. So like ClickFunnels, for example, you can actually have a timed button show up. Easy Webinar, which is my go-to software for the moment, will give you a button where you can actually, click it and people can go over to your offer in a new window, right? You don't want people to open the window and leave the webinar. that's a no-go. Like, you want to have the webinar running, or have at least have them listening to you while you're presenting your offer, and then going to the offer page and signing up. So they're not disengaged, so they can ask questions. Maybe they have an issue on the sign up page and they can let you know right away in the webinar. It's very important that you have a different window open. Make sure that you also put a link in the chat, and put it in regularly, because if people are chatting a lot and the chat is scrolling, make sure you're putting it into the chat fairly often, so that people don't lose it. So that at least if people can scroll up, or it's right there so they can see it. It's visible. And then once you're done with your call to action, you definitely want to have some social proof. So when you actually run through your social proof, you're going to be talking about people who've said things about you, testimonials that you've collected from your program that you're offering, or from people that have worked with you in your business. And if this is your first offer, then you want testimonials where people are talking about you in a general sense, but mentioning maybe the course, or maybe how they work with you, or what you've done for them in the past. And so a couple of those testimonials listed in between your call to action, so that people can, get a sense that, you're a real person, that you've helped people before, and that this new offer is not just sort of created from scratch, like that you've got experience. This is the main point of testimonials, is to show credibility and to show authority, and to show that you actually have experience in the thing that you're teaching right there on the webinar. Then you might want to go into a few objections. So one of the major objections is price, right? So people sometimes will say, oh, they can't afford it, or if your offer is a little too high, you'll offer them a payment plan, and so you'll put a button on the page, or you'll give a link to offer a payment plan, or you'll have the payment plan as part of the sale. The URL where they're going to go to place the order, there'll be an option for a full pay or a payment plan. And definitely mention that in your call to action, mention that in the webinar itself. Maybe people are struggling with time, maybe taking a 6-week program with you, or maybe for your challenge, or whatever the things that you're offering, is a high level of commitment. And so you'll reiterate and go over some of those time objections, remind them of the dream state, right? Remind them of where it's going to take them and what they're actually trying to accomplish in their life. Remind them of that, and that will maybe hopefully eliminate that objection specifically. Reiterate why your course or your program or your consultation is unique, why it's, how is it different to what other people are selling, if there are other products on the market as well. If it's a course, what level of interaction are you going to be giving in your course? Do you have a Facebook group? Are you inside of the Facebook group? Are you handling support calls, or are you, doing consultations yourself? Like, definitely create that uniqueness, not only in terms of what you're giving them in the course, but also why you. Why should they trust you? What's unique about you that they can know, like, and trust? And why should they give you, their money? Maybe do a second call to action before you close off the webinar, or before you go into a Q&A session, where you're going to remind them of the offer, the price, the discount, the bonuses, and the limitation in terms of when this offer is only available. You might want to only limit the offer to the webinar itself, to the 1 hour that you're there, or maybe 1 hour after the webinar. Most likely you're going to limit the offer to 3 days after, or 5 days after. So you give people a very short space of time to think about it, to ask their wife, ask their spouse, ask their boss, ask their whoever, or maybe find the money, right? Find the time to book the consultation, or whatever the case may be that's in their way that they can't sign up right away. But definitely try to get as many signups as you can live while they're there with you. And that leads me to the next thing, where the last part of your webinar is going to be Q&A. So you put your Q&A right at the end, and during your entire webinar, if people are asking questions, let them know that you're going to answer the questions right at the end. This gives you two things. If you answer the questions right away, that person will have the answer and then might leave your webinar. But if you say to them, hey, John, thank you so much for your question. I'm going to be answering that at the end of the webinar. Stick around and I'll answer you then. And that will help you to actually accumulate some of those questions, and then curate and pick the best questions that are coming up from chat. You can't answer all the questions if you have a really busy webinar, but if you've got a moderator, and I suggest you have a moderator with you on your webinar, they could curate those questions for you and then highlight those to you so that it's easy for you to answer, to keep the flow of the webinar going. That creates a bit of engagement as well. So if people know that they can ask questions and that you're going to answer them at the end, they at least are being acknowledged, and you're saying to them, hey, I saw your question. I'll answer you in a little bit here. Then they're going to stick around and they're going to wait for the answer. And sometimes you'll answer the questions during your webinar, and then at the end, you would go over that question and be like, okay, well, I've already answered that. Susie, is that okay? Did I cover you? Or John, did I cover you? Is everything okay? And if they respond, they say thank you, then that's great. You've covered them. So the Q&A session, leave time for that at the end, where maybe they're coming to you with the objections of, why they can't buy or what they need to see more of, and you can answer them right away. Or maybe they want to send an email to you to ask further questions. You can definitely entertain that at the end of the webinar. Obviously, after the Q&A session, thank people for showing up, acknowledge them for sticking around, wish them luck on their journey on the course, remind them that you'll see them in the course or inside your program or on the consultation call. For people who have signed up that maybe are still on the webinar, thank them if you can see those transactions live, and definitely acknowledge people for spending the time with you. Just be courteous, basically, is what I'm saying. And there's a couple of things that you need to do after the webinar as well. In terms of content after the webinar, follow up with emails. Right, so for people who showed up, send them an email acknowledging that they showed up and remind them of the offer if they didn't sign up live. For people who didn't show up, send them the replay if that's something you're going to offer. Make sure that your software is sending them the replay with that limited time offer. Life gets in the way. Maybe you had 30% of people show up to your webinar from the registrations you had. And so for the 70% that have not showed up live, give them the webinar anyway, because they did register. And from that, maybe you get another 10% of watching your replay. For people who have registered but didn't show up and didn't watch your webinar, maybe invite them for the next one. You can put them into your nurture sequence. Maybe they just weren't ready. Maybe the timing was just completely off. Maybe the emails got lost. Maybe they lost their phone. Maybe whatever the circumstance was, there's always another chance to remind them or to invite them to another session. And so these emails that are going to be sent out after your webinar are critically important. One, to try to up your engagement rate for attendance on your webinar itself. And two, for actually getting sales or getting consultation calls or whatever the thing is that you're offering after your webinar. Those are ways that you can try to recover or try to boost the sales or try to boost the performance of your actual webinar, and that gives you feedback, right? All of these things give you feedback in terms of how many people registered, how many people showed up, how many people watched the replay, how many people opened the emails after your webinar, how many people clicked on the links in your emails after the webinar. All of these things give you an indication as to what is going on in your webinar. And then the other thing you want to do after your webinar is look at the stats in terms of like when people showed up. How long did they stay in your webinar? At what moment did they leave? Did they watch 85% of your webinar? Did they leave when you presented the offer? Did they leave when you were teaching? Did they leave because of a certain slide? Did they leave maybe because you have a technical issue? Did they leave because you had a technical issue and your sound wasn't working, for example? Try to understand what the engagement was or what the issue was in your webinar for them to have left. Maybe you didn't ask enough questions. Maybe you didn't give them enough poll questions. Maybe there was a polarizing poll question that you asked that caused people, half of your webinar, to leave. There's a lot of different things that you can actually analyze from the stats that you get from your software, depending on which software you're using. And that'll indicate to you whether your webinar was a good webinar, or maybe you need to change the structure that I'm recommending, where you actually handle the objections earlier on and then present your offer. Test different things. The first webinar is not going to be your golden webinar. You might get lucky, but definitely as you do more and more live webinars, you're going to iterate, you're going to make changes, and you're going to change your slides, you're going to change your content, you're going to change your teaching. Maybe you're going to change your topic totally to actually suit the audience that you've invited to your webinar. If your webinar attendance was really low, maybe it was the topic of the webinar that just wasn't interesting enough. Maybe the time of the webinar wasn't a good time. And so definitely try to debunk some of these things and try to understand what was it that caused people to leave, that caused people to stay, that caused people to sign up. Like, look at both the positives and the negatives, and you'll understand what to do on your next webinar. This was a fairly long video. Thank you so much for sticking to the end. I've got other videos over here that are going to help you with other webinar related content and funnels related to what we're talking about in this video. If you like the video, again, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you don't miss another video, and comment below and let me know what you thought of the video itself and how your webinars are going. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.